America's most feared death row prisoners. The transfers that changed everything. The transfer that should never have happened. Before we go any further, hit subscribe, tap like, and drop a comment, because what you're about to hear isn't just another prison story. It's a chain of decisions that quietly reshaped America's death row system forever. The transport convoy was already moving when the call came in. Four unmarked vehicles cut through the desert highway just before dawn, their headlights muted, radios silent. Inside the lead van sat a man the system labeled unmovable. His name had been buried in sealed court files, but among corrections officials, he was known by a simpler title: The Risk. For years, he'd been held in near total isolation on death row, considered too volatile to relocate. Yet here he was, being transferred. The official reason was administrative: overcrowding, legal delays, budget reshuffling. But the officers escorting the convoy knew better. Transfers like this didn't happen unless something had gone wrong. Less than 20 miles into the journey, state troopers noticed something unusual. The GPS tracker assigned to the convoy began transmitting inconsistent data, briefly showing the vehicles miles off their planned route. Then it corrected itself. A glitch, dispatch said. Probably nothing. Inside the transport van, the inmate sat motionless, wrists cuffed, eyes fixed on the steel floor. He hadn't spoken since leaving the facility. But one guard later reported something unsettling: that during the brief GPS outage, the man smiled. Hours later, when the convoy finally arrived at the receiving prison, chaos was waiting. The intake team hadn't been fully briefed. Paperwork was incomplete. One signature, required for high-risk death row transfers, was missing. Someone had authorized the move without final clearance. That wasn't the worst part. During a routine inspection of the transport vehicle, officers discovered a second file tucked behind the main transfer order. It wasn't meant to be there. The document detailed an internal investigation into multiple past transfers involving the same inmate, each one followed by unexplained staff resignations, evidence mishandling, or sudden policy changes. This man wasn't just dangerous. He was influential in ways the system didn't want to admit. As night fell, the prison went into partial lockdown. Surveillance feeds were reviewed. Communications were restricted. And deep inside the administration wing, a senior official made a call that would later haunt him. "Do not log this transfer publicly," he said. "If this gets out, it won't just be the inmate we lose control of." But when investigators later accessed the sealed transport footage, they noticed one final detail. Just before the convoy entered prison grounds, the inmate leaned forward and whispered something to the guard beside him. Whatever he said never made it into the report. And by morning, one of the guards had vanished. The silence inside the system. By sunrise, the missing guard had become an official incident, though no one used that word out loud. Roll calls were conducted twice. Security logs were audited line by line. Cameras covering the intake corridor mysteriously froze for a 7-minute window during the night shift. It was written off as a technical fault, the kind prisons quietly accept to keep routines intact. But among senior staff, unease spread fast. Too many small failures were stacking up around one inmate. The transferred prisoner was placed in a temporary high-security unit, isolated from general population and monitored around the clock. Or at least, that was the plan. The reality was different. Guards reported subtle disruptions: doors unlocking a second slower than usual, intercoms activating without requests, records appearing altered after being digitally sealed. None of it was dramatic enough to trigger alarms. That was the problem. An internal investigator, Maria Klein, was assigned to quietly review the transfer. She had spent years examining procedural breakdowns in federal facilities, and she recognized a pattern forming. Not chaos, but erosion. The kind that happens when pressure is applied slowly, strategically. As she dug into past records, Klein found something disturbing. Every major prison transfer involving this inmate had been preceded by anonymous complaints, tips alleging misconduct, threats, or safety violations. Each time, investigations stalled. Careers ended quietly. Files were archived early. The inmate never touched anyone, never broke protocol. Yet systems bent around him. When Klein requested to interview the missing guard's family, she was denied. The guard, officials claimed, had taken emergency leave due to personal reasons. No missing person report. No welfare check. Just absence. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating among staff. Some claim the inmate had been communicating through indirect means, legal mail, coded grievances, routine requests that triggered specific administrative responses. Others dismissed it as paranoia born from stress. Then came the discovery that changed everything. A junior analyst flagged a discrepancy in the transfer authorization chain. The original approval didn't originate from the Department of Corrections. It came from a temporary oversight committee formed years earlier, one that had officially dissolved. Someone had resurrected its credentials. That meant the transfer wasn't just a mistake. It was engineered. Klein brought her findings to the warden, expecting urgency. Instead, she met resistance. She was advised, politely but firmly, to redirect her focus. The inmate was secure. The system was stable. Digging deeper would complicate matters unnecessarily. That night, Klein returned to her office to find her access privileges reduced. As she packed her files, she realized the most dangerous part of this case wasn't the man in isolation. It was the fear surrounding him. And somewhere inside the prison, behind reinforced doors and silent cameras, the inmate waited, knowing the system was already doing exactly what he needed it to do. The transfer that never ended the lockdown came without warning. At 2:17 a.m., the prison shifted into emergency protocol. Steel doors sealed, lights dimmed, and movement across the compound froze. Officially, it was a systems synchronization test. Unofficially, everyone knew something had gone wrong. Maria Klein was at home when her phone buzzed with a blocked number. No voice, just a single image sent as a file attachment. A scanned transport manifest. The inmate's name was listed under a future transfer scheduled for 6 weeks later, except the timestamp showed it had already been executed. The destination field was blank. Klein drove back to the facility as dawn crept over the razor wire. Inside the control room, supervisors argued in hushed voices. A transport vehicle had left the secure garage hours earlier under valid credentials, carrying 1 restrained inmate and 2 authorized escorts. The problem was simple and terrifying. No one on duty remembered approving it. The escorts' identities checked out until they didn't. Their personnel numbers belonged to retired officers, both deceased. The vehicle itself was real, logged, and tracked, until it crossed a rural county line where GPS coverage dipped for less than 90 seconds. That was all it took. The inmate's cell was empty. No damage. No struggle. Just neatly folded restraints placed on the steel bed frame. A message without words. Federal agencies took over before noon. The story released to the public was sanitized, a procedural error, swiftly corrected, no threat to public safety. Inside the walls, the truth settled like cold air. This wasn't an escape. It was the final phase of a transfer designed years in advance. Klein's investigation was quietly closed, then reopened under a different classification. Her access was restored, but only to files that led nowhere. The deeper truth, who authorized the dormant committee, who kept the credentials alive, who erased a guard from the system without paperwork, was buried under layers of institutional silence. 3 months later, a maximum security facility across the country reported an anomaly. A prisoner intake file appeared in their database without arrival footage. The name was redacted. The classification level was the highest they had ever seen. No transfer request followed. No explanation came. Somewhere within the system, the inmate was still moving, never touching the walls, never breaking the rules, only exploiting the spaces between them. They said America's most feared prisoners were locked away, controlled, contained. But this one proved something far more unsettling. Sometimes, the most dangerous transfers don't end at the gate. They disappear into the system itself. And if this story kept your pulse racing, remember, there are others just like it, still unfolding. Subscribe, because the next one may already be in motion.